And now it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Bradley Foyer, the Director of Medical and Academic Affairs and Regional Director of Medical Education from Columbia Hospital, forward to introduce our honoree.
Good afternoon, and thank you. You have in your packet a little bio of our honoree for today. So I will not bore you by reading it, but encourage you to do so. I want to talk a little bit more personally about Mr. Novack, since I guess it was about 26 years ago, more or less to the month, that I walked into the Office of Student Government at the University of Miami and met Paul Novack, who was sitting in the executive office. He was the speaker pro tempore of the student government at the University of Miami, and just kind of inquired about getting involved in politics and student leadership. It became apparent pretty readily that this is a gentleman who not only was a very good leader, but had the ability to motivate others to become a leader, and did so with me. In subsequent years, Mr. Novack rose to leadership as became president through a landslide victory at the University of Miami, made it look easy in terms of the way he was able to win that election. But more importantly, did a tremendous amount of good for the University of Miami, for its faculty, its staff, its administration, and for its students. And was a role model to many of us who later on to other areas of life to do our own thing. But certainly Mr. Novack did his own thing and went on to leadership as well. As you will see in the paperwork provided, he has been mayor of the town of Surfside for 6 consecutive terms, the longest standing mayor in the town of Surfside, until finally he decided not to run again and to seek other pursuits. He has been a member of the State of Florida Oversight and Advisory Board from Miami-Dade County. When he's not responding to hurricanes, floods, and other natural disasters in other countries such as Haiti and volunteering his time, he's either serving on the board of a community association or volunteering to the Coast Guard Auxiliary or coaching youth ice hockey. In addition, Mr. Novack serves the most important role, which many of us forget when we get into leadership, of being a good son and a father and a husband. It's been my impression, I've had the pleasure to have held leadership positions in the past, and in leadership I've recognized that there are generally 3 types of people that seek leadership. There are those who have something wrong emotionally and are kind of aberrant personalities, and you're like, how the heck did he or she get to that position? But they always show up to meetings, the next thing you know, they're president. There are those people that have a personal ulterior motive. They think that by getting involved in leadership, they'll be able to benefit themselves, their business, their family, or something personally. And then there are those people who have general altruistic tendencies, who feel good about helping others, who get a high off of making a difference and helping those that otherwise don't have the ability to help themselves. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the characteristics of our honoree for this evening, and it's this afternoon. And it's with great honor and pride that I introduce my friend, Mayor Paul Novack.
Thank you all very much, and thank you, Brad. One of the, perhaps the most recent good deed I could do is bring you and this group together. I hope that you'll all get to have an opportunity to know Brad better. He's such an outstanding person and a member of the Palm Beach County community. I want to thank this organization because in these past months I've gotten to know much more about you and what you stand for and how important that is, how few groups come together to devote themselves to the ideals of ethics, bringing people together and striving for excellence. And there's nothing more important, I think, in our community today than to identify those aspects of life that involve ethical conduct and to help bring the standard, the bar up throughout the community. For myself, I'm more of a juggler than anything else. All my life held multiple positions and roles, and knowing all the time that none of the achievements that you may read about or hear about that are associated with my name are in any way about me alone. They really represent a conglomeration of people, a team that produced results together. First and foremost, my family. It's always, from the very beginning, been an inspiration to me, and how fortunate I am to have today with us my mother and my sister and my wife and my in-laws, and that says something, I think, special also. My in-laws would be in attendance today. And they inspire me and always have in everything I've ever done. They're the strength behind everything I've been able to do. And of all my roles and the titles that I've held, I've always known that the most important ones were husband, father, son, member of a family. Because it's from that type of togetherness and entity that it's enabled me and facilitated my ability to do things for other people beyond our family. And within that foundation also, of course, are teachers and professors, people that have instilled within me that desire to go out and do good things for other people. I'm an attorney, but you won't hear me speak about that really today because that's just one part. I'm one of those many lawyers that are out there that you never really hear about that aspect of the law anymore. So many of us, though, that became lawyers because we wanted to help other people. I know we have lawyers like that in the room today. I know we have lawyers like that throughout the community, and they do so much work that you don't read about, you don't hear about. They went into the profession for the right reasons and spend their careers doing things for the right reasons. But everything I've tried to do has been to reflect those values and to represent the highest standard of ethics and integrity in all of those roles. Thomas Jefferson said a long time ago, honesty is the first chapter of the book of wisdom. You don't get further into the book until you've got that first chapter down pat. When I became mayor of the town of Surfside, it wasn't a very well-known community. It's a small coastal community in Miami-Dade County with some great natural assets, the first of which was its people. But when I came into office, it was a very different place than it is today. Inherited a lot of red ink, a lot of problems, and the problems all came back to one thing, that unfortunately there were people involved in public office that seemed to find it more important to serve themselves than to serve others. And we see that everywhere, not just in this community or in this country, but all over the world. And a group of people came into office with an entirely different perspective and a different priority. Take a community adrift and drive it towards better, what essentially is customer service. Our customers are our residents, focusing on excellence in service and the highest standards of integrity in producing that excellence in service. Today, and many of the town's present officials are here in the room, and to their credit and to the credit of over 100 employees and dozens of elected and appointed officials over this past decade or so, that commitment to excellence has really provided results. I'm talking about a town where if you pick up the phone, 60 seconds later, if you call the police department, you've got 2 police cars pulling up at your door. A town where 6 days a week, garbage and trash is collected from the side of your house. A town where in more than a decade there's been absolutely no increase in tax rates. A town that lives within its means and goes beyond. A town that found a way to get its own ship in order and then help others get their ships in order. It was only about 6 months after I was elected that we were hit by Hurricane Andrew. And there are people in this room that just went into action immediately, cleaned up, secured our own community, and then turned to find how can we help those that were really badly hit. And immediately went into a mode of getting help and goods and relief down to South Dade, inspiring other communities to do the same. It wasn't long before we found that we could really make a difference in a unique way by directly helping other people. And it wasn't long before we were directly helping people in Haiti, in Honduras, in the Dominican Republic, We were bringing teams of volunteers to Haiti into places where, when we would meet with military officials, we would find that these areas were redlined on the maps, where military personnel were not permitted in because they were too dangerous. Our volunteers were going to those very areas. Our volunteer relief teams were going to where there was no United Nations, there was no Red Cross, there was no anything, but our people bringing food and supplies into where there was nothing and no help. And they carried that through and carry it through to this day, being of service on an international basis. It was just earlier this year that the United States State Department brought a delegation from the Republic of Georgia to Surfside to show them an example of what they found to be an all-American city, one that reflected the ideals of our country, and one that they wanted to visit Surfside on Memorial Day, as we recognize those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice to serve and to protect our country. We stood to create new youth projects, to renovate virtually every facility in the town, and to create new ethics and conflict of interest laws that have been on the books now for over a decade. We looked at those that exist and said, we're going to step it up higher, and we're going to reach that higher level ourselves and serve as a model to others. Statewide, that remains intact today. Through all these activities, serving in relief modes and disaster situations, whether close to home or very far away, we also found ways to not use any public funds to do it. It was all based on volunteers, support from the business community, a selfless attitude, an attitude of how can I help people that can't help themselves? How can I help people that may be starving, that may have lost everything, that are just not anywhere near as comfortable or as secure as we are? And you've got people from the town here today, and I know you've got people from your businesses and community groups that do this on an everyday basis, on a 24/7 basis. And they make an immeasurable difference in the lives of everyone throughout our community and our country. We got involved with our county. We looked at issues like the public beaches and traffic control and zoning authority. We looked at the overdevelopment issues that plague all of Florida today. And we said, we can do better. We can serve as an example. In over a dozen years now, the total number of variances that have been granted by the town of Surfside for the size of buildings or the density of buildings is zero. Zero. The percentage of the time when we said what we want to do is simply adhere to the law, not provide any favoritism, not allow for any special interest to get any special treatment, is 100% of the time. A town that stood up and said, well, what can be done here is simply what does the law allow, no matter who you are, what you seek to do. And this type of consistency has proven to be of service not just to us, but statewide. We saw just last year where out of Tallahassee, there was a turning of the tide and a rejection of the type of overdevelopment that harms people's quality of life, because that's what it's about, protecting a community, enhancing quality of life. We looked at public education, and as a community, we got very, very involved in public education. I remember when I showed up with my son for his first day in kindergarten, and there were 900 kids attending a school built for 350. And we got involved. Our parents, our community, our town leaders, everybody got involved and looked into what can be done. And it wasn't long before we were able to get a new state-of-the-art elementary school built there. But we didn't stop there, because what we learned, one of the stories and experiences that I've shared with Heidi, is what we found when we got involved in public education. We heard all the excuses. There's not enough money. There's too much red tape. It's the fault of the state government. It's everybody else's fault. And what we found when we really got into it was none of those things were true. We found that in Miami-Dade County, there was more than enough money to build new schools. It just wasn't happening. And we found that there was a lot that could be done. I was, not long after that, invited to serve as principal for the day at Miami Beach Senior High School, where I went to school. And in that one day as principal of the day, learned that there were some horrendous situations facing 3,000 students and teachers every day. There wasn't one single fire alarm working in the entire school. There wasn't one single smoke detector. There wasn't one building that had adequate exits. There wasn't any level of safety at all. It was a disaster waiting to happen. So we started looking at inspection reports to see what exactly is going on and why. And we found that for 10 years prior, every year, fire inspectors had come out to the school and found the same life-threatening issues: combustible ceiling tiles, flammable drapes, blocked exits, inoperable fire alarms, and like I mentioned, not even one single pull box anywhere in the school that was working. But what was happening was that there was a disconnect in the system. Fire inspectors would come out from the fire departments. They would find reams and reams of life-threatening issues. They would file their report, and that was it, because public schools were immune from any authority of the fire departments. And so in our county, and as I later found out as we took this issue statewide, schools all over the state of Florida operated only unto themselves. If they chose not to employ life safety funds to increase life safety, nobody had anything to say about it because they were autonomous in these areas. Even a fire marshal who could close a warehouse if it didn't have a sprinkler system where there were no human beings in that warehouse, just boxes, and that could be closed. Or if any of you have businesses or restaurants and you've been inspected, you know that's serious. If you don't have the right system in place, you're not going to be open for business tomorrow. And you're going to go through a long process before you've proven that you've got safety in place. In our public schools, with our kids there, with teachers there every day, none of that was true. None of it was true. Schools operated year after year after year where the next day could be the day that a wing would burn down. In 1958, that's exactly what happened in Chicago. And a school burned down and kids and teachers were killed. And after the fact came the grand juries, came the investigations, came the state and federal authorities, and came a fire code that was enforced. In Florida, not the case. The fire marshals were separated out from any authority and disregarded. It took 2 years, and it took a lot of people in Surfside, our officials, our employees, our parents, our engineer, people that stood up and said, this can't be. And in that 2 years, what we were able to do is have the legislature change the law. Today, if a fire marshal goes into a school and finds life-threatening issues, and they are not corrected, the fire marshal now has the authority to close that school. And that's a matter of preventing loss of life. When we looked at the funding issues, because we were confronted with those so-called funding issues on fire safety and on school construction, we had virtually every school in Miami-Dade County was overflowing with kids. They took away phys ed fields and put portable classrooms on them. They closed cafeterias and divided them up so that they became 4 or 6 classrooms. So the kids didn't have physical education. They didn't have lunch outside the classroom. Sometimes there'd be 50 kids inside a classroom with so many desks you couldn't make it to the one door if you did have a fire, and you couldn't alert anybody that there was a fire. At Beach High, I'll never forget, first they told me the alarm systems did work, and we had to tour the top administration of the district to show them it didn't. Then they told me they had a backup system, which was a push button that was like a PA system that allowed you to communicate to the office. We had to do a second tour to show them that half those boxes didn't work, and the ones that did work were irrelevant because there was no one sitting at that desk where the speaker was in the school office. And then they actually had the nerve to say to me, we have a third backup system. I said, what's that? Well, we're right next door to a fire station. They'll see the smoke. This is the level of responsibility and accountability you found in the 4th largest public school system in the country. when we'd have to overcome each excuse, each obstacle, then it became, we don't have the money. So all of us with full-time jobs, by the way, every public official, every elected official in the town of Surfside makes the grand salary of $1 per year. No benefits, no insurance, nothing but aggravation, I can tell you that. But they took upon themselves another job, and that was to straighten out and make safe and make accountable our school system, recognizing how important the youth was to our community. You know how important they are. To the business community, to our public health, to our public safety. It all starts at the schools, at our public schools. So we were told they didn't have the money to build new schools or to make older schools safe. So we looked at the money. And when I found with their own documents that they had over $1 billion essentially sitting there, it was half cash and half approved bonds. Their first reaction was to just deny it. And they would write op-ed pieces in the Herald and say, Novack's crazy. We don't have $1 billion. He must be wanting to run for school board. He has some axe to grind. He wants a new school for his kids, whatever they could come up with, not to admit that they had what they had. I had to take their budget documents up to Tallahassee and sit with the governor and with the chief financial officer of the Department of Education, and they looked over these papers and said, there's that money. It is there. So then the school system took a different tack because they could no longer deny that they had the money. So now they said, yeah, we got the money, and we're using it very well. It's all earmarked for projects. So they gave us another set of obstacles. We had to research and find that those projects had been on the books for over 10 years. Those earmarked accounts with over $1 billion turned out to be nothing more than a parking lot where you park money and slowly drain it away. We had to do the research to find they were paying operating expenses out of capital money, not appropriate, and making the construction program suffer without any progress. So they wrote a new set of op-ed articles. Once again, Novack's wrong. He's crazy. We don't know where he's coming from. All this money is in productive use. So we came forth with the books and the records to show that for over 10 years, there had been money parked in school projects with names of new schools on them that didn't have one brick anywhere close to the ground. The state created an oversight board for these reasons and for others that are more publicized. Perhaps you remember the land deals and the scandals that were on TV about, they would use this capital money to buy swampland. And after they would buy the land for several $1 million, they would find that it needed several $1 million worth of demucking. And after they did the demucking, they would find that, well, in one case, it was an Indian burial ground, and you're not building anything there. And they would check the records after they'd buy the land. And the money would flow, but the classrooms wouldn't come online. It's one of the underlying reasons why we have today a class size amendment. People don't realize that perhaps it was never necessary to amend the Constitution to talk about how many kids should be in a class. If the school districts had just been spending the money they had, we wouldn't have overcrowding. We wouldn't have unsafe schools. So the state appointed an oversight board, and I still serve on it today as an appointee of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And we've proven that the money is there and that it can be used. And today, finally, we're seeing signs of progress. We're seeing the possibility that maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that maybe 5 years from now, we can actually have dozens and dozens and dozens of brand new state-of-the-art schools built to relieve overcrowding, to end the unsafe conditions, and to give the kids what we're paying for, which is that we should have a first-class system of public education. The taxpayers are paying for it, and the kids deserve it. It just wasn't being delivered. What was getting delivered was a long series of excuses that had no foundation in fact. So we asked the school systems, and we asked the state and everybody involved, rise to that level of integrity and accountability and productivity that is your job description. And we're seeing that today, there's the opportunity, there's hope that we're going to see the results of that in these next couple of years to come. On issues like the zoning that I mentioned, the public education that I mentioned, the public services to our customers, always what we had in mind is how do we deliver the very best? How do we change structures like we did with fire safety accountability? Because structures outlast personalities. Structures outlast individuals. And so within state law, within our community, we changed a number of structures. The one that we were able to accomplish right at the end of my 6th term of office was the result of leaders in our community getting with basically the best and the brightest statewide on how do you change a structure to reflect enhancing and protecting and preserving quality of life. So while we gave 0 variances and were consistent with our zoning code and our building code, we recognize that need not always be the case, and many communities have a real ebb and flow in how well their zoning is enforced or not. We also realize that once damage is done on zoning or overdevelopment issues, it's permanent. If you allow tremendous overdensity to exist, it's never going to go away. It's never going to change. You think that the congested traffic and the congested schools are issues of their own, when in reality they are the byproduct of overdevelopment, no planning, no forethought, no consistency, just approving and approving and approving without thinking it through. So that last structural change we made before I left office was we put to the people of our town the opportunity to vote yes or no on a referendum to change our charter, and to give themselves the power to change the zoning code. That if there was going to be an increase in the density or an upward change in what was going to be allowed, we, the officials of the town, were saying to the people, we want to give that power to you. You decide. You're going to live here. You're going to raise your children here, and your term of living here is going to outlast any public official. And by a vote of over 90%, the people of Surfside accepted and received that authority and responsibility. So now going forward forever, we as a group that were in office during that decade and held the gates against any type of impropriety, any type of lack of forethought, now pass that on to all of our constituents, so that the key is in their hands. And they forever now will have the authority to decide the future and the density and the quality of life of their community. It's basically saying to our customers, to our residents, this is your store. You'll make the ultimate decisions, not just in electing officials, but in making those fundamental decisions that can alter your community forever. So that passed and has become an inspiration statewide, particularly among coastal communities that want to preserve their quality, that don't want to sell out, that don't want to give away the store. Looking at additional communities now, making the residents the owner of that store. So what we've learned through all these experiences and all these paths, and I've given you a few examples in terms of overdevelopment and public education, public safety, what we've learned is that not everything is as it's taught in the civics classes. Not everything works easily or smoothly. Not all structures are perfectly made. But it's in our hands to change them and make them better. It's in our hands to jump in and say, I can make a contribution, I have an idea, and I have a part to play. And every person in this room absolutely has a part to play. Every person in this room already is, by your presence, by your activism in this organization, playing a part and giving others the chance to see that and to join the effort. Because there's always a tide, there's always a momentum of self-service, of special interests, of trying to manipulate a system not for the good of the common people or the community or the public at large. But groups like yours and individuals like you're what can stand in the way of that and continue to have communities grow and enhance themselves with a mirror so that it's doing what's best for the people. Inch by inch, many times, day by day, but everybody can make good things happen. There's going to be opposition, there's other agendas, but it can be overcome through perseverance. I took Taekwondo with my son and my daughter, and the tenets that they teach you are tenets that exist in public service and in professional and business life. Perseverance, indomitable spirit, the idea that you just do the right thing, and you do the right thing, and you do the right thing. And staying on that track really does, in the long haul, produce the results. It's all got to be done with that level of ethics and public trust. Abraham Lincoln said, "With public trust, everything is possible. Without it, nothing is possible." He was right then, and he's right today. So I want to take this final word to just tell you that we can all share a great optimism, a great knowledge that we have the ability to do good by our community and by others through our day-to-day activities in our businesses, in our professions, and in our public service. I thank you very much for inviting me today, and I want to salute you for what you're doing for our present and our future. Thank you very much.
Absolutely incredible. Did I tell you, folks? This was a marvelous story. And if you notice, he always said we, but I want you to hear the I that he didn't say, because so much of this was what he did on his own time, own efforts, and at sometimes personal risk. Do you have any questions for Mr. Novack? Brent?
It's there. It's there. When you expose a system for having what is today an account with $1.5 billion in it, and there's people that benefit from the old way of doing business, let's say, and you stand against overdevelopment and people that would prefer to make $100 million on a project that's not within the zoning code than make $10 million on one that is within the zoning code. When you stand and say the right thing, period, regardless, there is. I've known people that have done the same thing, that have had to start their cars by remote control. I've known people that have had great personal sacrifice in many ways, their time and their energy. And what we see today is there's a viciousness in public life today, perhaps more than ever. We saw some of it in the presidential campaign, and I guarantee you it's all the way down to every level of public life, where there are those who have a self-interest that try to manipulate the system and try to find a way to use it against good people, whether it be smearing them, defaming them, discrediting them, anything they can do to clear the path towards their goal of self-interest. So there are risks, and we need people to accept those risks. That's one of the reasons why what your organization does is so important, because we need to support and encourage people to take the risks. If we don't, we've abdicated to those who don't have public service on their agenda. And it's just absolutely essential that that everyone play a part in supporting and encouraging doing the right thing. It's something my parents taught me when I was very young. Just do the right thing. And we need to teach our children that. We need to teach our leaders in civic and business and professional life that, like your organization is reaching out to do. And we need to stand together because there are those that benefit and profit from doing things the wrong way. And we all know that. But usually we pick up the newspaper every morning and we read about these things and we go about our life. And that's what most people do. If most people would play some part in turning that around, I think it'll turn around a lot quicker than otherwise.
Paul, I did happen to read this newspaper article about a car that you had. What happened to that car?
I've had acid poured on my car. I've had threats made against me. I've had complaints filed against me. I've had criticism launched against me that is beyond the pale. We enforce the code. I'll give you an example. We simply enforce the code and the law. So there was a group that wanted to maintain packs of stray cats on the beach. The code doesn't allow that. It's a public beach. And it wasn't long before we were all under this relentless attack that we were killing animals. They would send out messages that we had the police using poison gas to kill animals. All kinds of unbelievable things, but the tactics, the viciousness, the venom that's out there, the concoctions that they'll come up with, the personal attacks, any way to really cut you down, discredit you, get you out of their way, they'll do it. And you find that sometimes things that don't seem related are related. Politics and public life is a very difficult arena. And I'm sure you all know people that would be very outstanding public officials that if you took them aside and asked them to consider running for office would say to you, you've got to be crazy. What would I do that for? Why would I expose myself and my family to that? And there's truth in that, is the real shame of it. But we need to help people individual by individual overcome that and take that risk and pay that price. We have people pay much greater price. We have young people today in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and in places all over the world, and they're risking their very life. They're wearing the uniform of our country and saying, I will defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. I will defend the people of the United States of America. So the risks that people like me take pale in comparison with the risks that are being taken by brave men and women all over the world. So the least, I think, we can do is do something to protect our communities at home. That's why, through the generations, people have protected our country. It's because, in essence, they're protecting our communities, our freedom, our democracy. And it has to be done at every level, or it just doesn't work.
Good question, Brent. Any other questions? The Honorable Dorothy Wilkin.
Would you like to move to Palm Beach County?
I think we're all going to be moving to Surfside. Where's the current mayor of Surfside? We'd like you to stand and his name is?
Mayor Tim Will. We have our town manager, Jeff Smolansky. We have our former town manager and vice mayor, Eduardo Rodriguez. Commissioner Orestes Jimenez. Commissioner Steve Levine. Town clerk, Bella Carcassis. And our town engineer, Ovi Ojito. Everything takes a team, you know that. Everything takes people relying on one another. At Veterans Day ceremonies yesterday, Mayor Will reminded us all that when you take your induction oath to enter the service, what essentially people are doing are vowing to serve each other and to protect each other. And out there in the field, in a battle, that's what's being done. Those men and women are protecting each other first. That's the crisis of the moment. And that ideal inserts itself into everything we do in our professions, our business, and our communities. We need to work for the betterment of each other, protect each other. And I think if we rise to that occasion, we'll all be better for it. So, thank you.
Any other questions? I'm going to take this moment. If you haven't seen this exquisite plaque that we present, the Professional and Business Forum recognizes and honors Paul D. Novack for his dedication to advancing excellence, higher values, integrity, and ethics in the South Florida professional and business community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.